I'm Danny Otto. Welcome into an all-new episode of That Recap Show. Now, before we get into the episode, just want to issue major spoiler alert. We are going to be going over everything that happened in the Season 1 finale of Daredevil Born Again. So if you haven't watched that episode yet, you may want to pause this video, head over to DisneyPlus, check out that finale, and then come back and enjoy the breakdown. Now, with that out of the way, let's start the show.
Poppin' Off presents That Recap Show.
Joining with me to break down everything from the Season 1 finale of Daredevil Born Again, it's Jon Jon Rico!
Hello.
Hello!
Oh, boy.
Do we get a catchphrase? Nothing?
No. Sorry to disappoint.
There were a lot of good sayings. I mean, you could have gone with, like, you're still an asshole or something like that.
Why would I call you an asshole?
Well, it was out of the show!
Yeah.
Anyway. I'll give you mine. Nightgown Man.
Is that a new costume? What do they call you now? Nightgown Man.
Yeah. I knew you'd like that one when I heard it.
I loved it. I instantly came to our rundown and wrote that down because I was like, first, I'm definitely doing this. I watched just up to that, came down and just wrote that in. I was like, this is gonna be great.
Nice.
But yeah. I would love somebody, like, I'm sure there are way more talented people than myself on the internet that make a title card in the same font and style of Daredevil Born Again, and it just says Nightgown Man Born Again. Like, it has to be out there somewhere. There are definitely talented people that have the same sense of humor. So, internet, do your internet things.
Memers, go meme.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I did want to say as an overall, and there's so much to unpack from this finale, and we're going to get into so much with takeaways and predictions and stuff like that, is overall, when I finished watching this, it really felt like an Infinity War type of tone. Meaning, like, the bad guys won. Like, you know what I mean? Like, our heroes are down. But we know there's a season 2, just like we knew with Infinity War, there was an end game coming out type of thing. So we know, that the other shoe's gonna drop in season 2 type of thing. And we're going to have this. So we do have that hope. But this ends on a very dark ending, which is exactly like with Infinity War. You finish Infinity War, like, holy shit. I remember seeing that in the theaters for the first time and just like going, oh my God. Like, I can't believe this is happening. But that's kind of felt that where, like, we're bringing these characters to, like, the darkest timeline. And then like, now we have a season 2 to have these characters kind of get back on top, like be able to overcome what is all
Empire
happening.
Strikes Back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Bria, what were some of your instant reactions for the season 1 finale of Daredevil?
Yeah, I thought this was a pretty fitting finale for all the major storylines that were being told up until this point, for sure. We were talking a little bit before the recap started recording that I almost feel like this is almost sort of like a big Frank episode as opposed to like a really big Daredevil episode, because there's a lot of Frank in this, and I think a lot of the action and stuff is really showcased by him as well. But I loved it too, because I love getting to see Jon Bernthal as Punisher as well. But I love just kind of getting like that back to the old formula of the old show too, because we're bringing back old characters like Karen too. Karen makes a return here as well, and it just creates a cool new character dynamic between those 3 characters too. That was really fun to watch as the episode progressed on. So yeah, it just kind of felt like the return to old times, like you could say, kind of like the premiere felt as well when we got those scenes with Foggy and stuff. So that was actually a really cool thing too. And yeah, I do like that we kind of get Fisk ending this season on top too, because I would feel like the last few times we've seen him, he's kind of getting the short end of the stick too. And for for Kingpin, we need to see him winning every once in a while to kind of give that power back to him in some sort of way. So I do like that it kind of sets that up really well for season 2. But yeah, there's also like a few things that were kind of like they were touched upon in this episode, but then there wasn't like really like I feel like a wrap up to their storyline so much. So I think that we get some good teases for characters going forward, of course, like Heather and even Daniel. Kind of because I think Daniel's now becoming like the new Wesley for Fisk now, which I think is kind of a cool character arc that I wasn't like for some reason I didn't see happening, but now that I see him becoming more and more of like that guy for Fisk, I'm like, oh, he's like making himself a new Wesley. So I think that's really cool to see. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of see where they take these stuff, take the stuff that they kind of step in this episode and how it's going to lead to an even bigger story that's being told in season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. There's so much to kind of like little things. I mean, we got a shot of Bullseye, so we know he's still around. He's definitely gonna, come up in season 2. Yeah. I'm so curious at what's gonna happen with Daniel, like how that's gonna pan out and everything. There was a shot with him too, like, and we, I guess, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Maybe I'll talk more about this in takeaways. You want to get some big takeaways?
Sure.
Awesome. All right, why don't you kick off big takeaways, and then I'll finish my thought with Daniel.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing I really can take away from this, I was talking about, obviously this is a very Punisher heavy episode, and a lot of big Punisher violence comes in this episode as well. And yeah, so John Berthal was not kidding when they was giving interviews before the show premiered, talking about how like they're not toning down Frank at all when it comes to like his into the MCU, and that was a big fear people had about him coming into like I guess a Disney-fied version of the MCU, a version of Frank possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, like, he just assured us that everything was gonna be okay. It looks like it turns out he was right. I would argue they actually like doubled down on the violence in a lot of different ways in this too, especially when it comes to like even Frank's kills. Like Frank was already like graphically killing people before, but like he does some pretty gruesome stuff in this too that I don't know I've ever seen them do in the Netflix shows at all. So yeah, I actually do appreciate them doing that. It's big hats off to Disney for even like kind of greenlighting them to be able to tell that kind of story within this kind of world they have here. Because I think it's like when it comes to the MCU also itself, it's some of the most brutal action that we've gotten to date, and we've gotten some pretty big action pieces throughout the last 10 plus years, 15 years now at this point. So yeah, I do love that, but like for all the crazy brutal shit that Punisher does throughout this episode, the crown goes to Fisk on this one, because we really get like the most Kingpin thing ever with Fisk, with him just taking Gallo's head and crushing it with his bare hands. So like, and even like giving it that kind of like that mafia boss feel kind of thing to it too, because they have Gallo getting picked up by one of his old deputies, and he kind of starts putting the things together like, oh crap, this is not going to end well for me. So yeah, just like that whole kind of like display of power showing that Kingpin is back in full form basically is just really really well done stuff. I just like that we get to see kind of Fisk and with a smile on his face and kind of doing that whole thing, because it's funny, we get these images of drawings of Fisk in the comics. He's a very imposing figure, of course, but some of the things that make him more scary to me is when he's just like when he does have that smile, because like when a guy like that who's so dangerous and he's actually having fun with what he's doing, I think that to me is where it's like, oh god, this guy's got some like resources at his disposal, and he can do some bad stuff with it. And Fisk, Vincent D'Onofrio's version of Fisk, I feel like rarely smiles, and when he does, that's when like the real like terror feeling kind of comes out. So I just love that ending shot of him and Vanessa at the table, and he's just got like this big giddy grin on his face, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like he's just thriving right now, and I love it. So yeah, a Fisk in power is really fun to watch because he's really the Kingpin now.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that scene took me by surprise. Not the Vanessa and Fisk, having a great meal in the room below where they're keeping captured people in cages. But the scene where he actually crushed Gallo's head, because we've seen that move before where Fisk is grabbed onto somebody's head and kind of like squeezed and like hurt them, and then is like basically thrown them into a wall or thrown them, across the
guy's
room.
Head with the car door.
Yeah, exactly. But he's never really just straight up done that. So I was not expecting that. I told you
all that pasta.
Yeah. What I thought he was going to do was do that, obviously, to hurt him while he's like talking to everybody else in the room. And then I thought he was just going to like do a finishing move where he was just going to throw him like down onto the concrete type of thing. And obviously like kill him that way. But yeah, I was not expecting that. That was absolutely brutal. Yeah.
That's very Thanos, like I would
Yeah.
say, too, in a sense, just like the display of power in front of his fellow kind of like task force people. And then
Yep.
of course, I would say the other Thanos comparison for me too is that dinner scene with Vanessa where he's got that smile on his face. Is basically Thanos sitting out in Sanctuary in the garden after he snaps people with that little grin on his face, and then boom, cut to credits. So I think that's exactly what they're trying to mirror here. Is that Fisk is like our New York City Thanos, if you will.
I mean, that totally fits. Like,
Yeah, and that's always been kind of like, that's always kind of been like his role when it comes to like street level crime too. Is like you got your levels of villainy and stuff. He is the top of that tier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have to say this. So you were talking about Frank and his brutal fighting style during the scene, in Matt's apartment and everything during the blackout. Watching Frank fight, there's this one moment where he like leaps over, like I think it's the kitchen island type of thing, leaps over it and just like grabs a guy. And I was like, I've seen something like that before. And it just like jogged an old memory. It looked exactly like Logan in I mean, I'll say X2, where he's just like leaping at guards and stuff when they start invading the mansion and everything. And I was like, man, if you gave Jon Bernthal some claws, that's totally Wolverine fighting style. And then a second later, he starts stabbing the guy, and I was like, oh my god, he just has Wolverine's fighting style. And I was like,
they both have a feral nature to him.
Yeah, I was like, he's Wolverine with a gun. Like that's it. Frank is Wolverine with a gun. But that leads into kind of my biggest takeaway is I love Matt and Frank's dynamic and just their back and forth.
Not gonna do it with your ass hanging out.
Because especially in the moments that we had of them together in this episode, they had these just moments of bickering in the best way possible because it just kind of cut the tension just a little bit, not over the top. It just seemed like, these are two people that are on opposite ends of the morality spectrum and stuff like that. So they're constantly bickering at each other, but it just worked so well for me. And I loved every minute of it. It's the whole reason why I loved Sam and Bucky, like their back and forth and stuff like that when they're kind of stuck together, like working together and everything like that. I love having Matt and Frank working together, and especially like when during that scene, or I guess towards the end of that scene, when they have to jump out the window because Matt hears a grenade and they land and everything. After all of that, Matt's, kind of swung. Obviously, they had to. Couldn't have made that fall without it. Swung both him and Frank out and landed not so gracefully onto a car top. And basically, Matt says something to the effect of, you really are an asshole. And Frank basically just agrees. He goes, yeah.
Yeah, he knows.
Yeah,
he's always done that.
I just love that is the moments of bickering and kind of just the back and forth that I just love and appreciate that they add and they have in there because it just I love that about two characters like that in these situations, and I will always love when you can get that kind of dynamic with two characters and it feels not forced. It just feels like a natural thing with these two characters, and so
they have a great natural chemistry,
right? So I just love that. You know what it really it reminds me of like the first Bad Boys, where they're kind of bickering as they're going through all the chaos and gunfights and like car chases and everything like that, and we still have the two main characters like bickering during all of that. It just adds so much to the dynamic of the two partners basically. So I will always appreciate that when it's a good placement. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like anything like that. It just makes sense. And so I love that. And so that's like my biggest takeaway from it. I would love, just a Daredevil and Punisher series. Like give me a Daredevil Punisher series where it's just them all the time. And I would love that type of thing too. But
their banter in this episode to me felt a lot more like a back and forth you'd read between them in a comic book for sure. I love their scene in episode 4 because it's just like this hard hitting emotional scene between them too, and we get that good balance of that. I think they balance this out really good too, and then in the moments where like especially with the Officer Cole, essentially when they finally have him subdued, and Frank is basically the devil on Matt's shoulder, being like, do it, like fucking do it. And Matt's just trying to fight off that kind of devil on his shoulder, right? So and then they'll go into that the funny banter stuff, like just the way like when he first gets to his apartment, he's like, oh yeah, like, you're the last person I expected to be here. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a cool way to like to say him just up being in the house in general too. So yeah, I do love that. My favorite scene with Punisher in this too is actually the scene with him and the task force. When he's finally captured, and he finally gets into Powell's face, and he's just like, you guys are all a bunch of fucking clowns.
Yeah, bunch of clowns.
Thinking you know me and stuff like that. I'm like, that's a great Punisher. Seeing him just taking the punishment, for lack of a better term, but that they give to him. That was like so Frank coded to me, and I'm just like, yeah, I want more stuff like that. That's the stuff I love when it comes to Frank, when he's just like spitting in the face of people who think that they know him.
Right. I also liked another, going back a little bit from where he's captured by the task force and everything like that. But when they're still in Matt's apartment before everything goes crazy, where Matt's still in the hospital gown, and that's where we get Nightgown Man. But Matt stands up and Frank goes, well, you're gonna fight everybody with your ass out? And Matt just flicks him off, and just like, I love this back and forth. I love their banter. It fits so perfect. It jumps so seamlessly from these serious dramatic moments between the two to this just like, brotherly giving each other shit back and forth type of thing. Like it feels so natural in kind of jumping between dramatic and humor, like just intertwined there just a little bit. So that's why I thought that scene was so important to me that I wanted to make sure I talked about it.
Yeah, they yin to each other's yang.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but you want to get to some predictions?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna kick off predictions, and I just look. There is so much that got teased, and we've already kind of mentioned some of the things that got teased, but like there is so much that actually got teased. I'm actually going to start with something that I didn't even write down here because I meant to bring up, the Daniel thing that I was talking about before we even got into takeaways. Was I'm so curious to find out what Daniel is going to end up being, but there is this one shot of Daniel where I think he's talking to the council before, like during the blackout and stuff like that, and they were like, and he's like trying to blackmail them basically. And
I think it's during the blackout.
Yeah, during the blackout.
They're in like a really dark room with like, it looks like just like shoddy electricity,
right.
Or just projectors.
He's standing there, and it almost looks like the same, like the suspenders and everything. The way that he's standing makes it look like the way Muse is wearing the suspenders without a coat and thing. I'm just saying, it looked so similar to that. I was like, is there something in here? Not saying that Daniel, Daniel's Muse or Daniel's going to end up becoming Muse, but saying like, as just kind of a, you saw Muse kind of look like this before. So like, just know Daniel's going to start turning more and more into a villain. Like, and kind of just less and less like, oh, he's just aligned with this, and more downward spiral into actual villain. So like, I'm even wondering like if Daniel is then going to become something past Fisk and have like a whole villain arc and become like another kind of villain. Just kind of sussing it out right now. I'm wondering what's going to happen with him in season 2 and just kind of moving forward. All from that shot.
Interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, so for real predictions, I mean, the first thing and probably the most obvious thing is I'm really curious of who is going to end up being on Matt's army, which is what we get as kind of like that epilogue kind of scene that we get.
Know a few people.
Yeah. I mean, we see a few people, and I mean, Josie is one of them.
She's the that looks like the kind of the head of operations will be at Josie's. It feels
right. So I mean, we have these people that are not vigilantes, but I'm more leaning
and Cherry.
Right. Yeah. I'm more leaning and wondering who on the vigilante side we're going to see. Knowing that we didn't get any cameos in the finale, but they're going to need all the help they can get. It's not like, oh,
Right.
we're just going to be, in the shadows and stuff like that. We're going to need some vigilantes. Like, we're going to need some people. So I'm really curious on who they're going to bring in. I mean, I think the most obvious is to bring in a defender or two, if not all of them, but a defender or two. Still leaning towards kind of like a Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, because we know, they're in proximity.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, I mean, if we could see, some characters that have kind of been more street level, like a Moon Knight. Like I get that, he's kind of, mystical, and he's kind of on the mystical side of things, but he hasn't been in any movies yet. So, it's realistic that we could potentially see him kind of more put on a street level kind of thing to kind of mix him in with some more MCU characters moving forward, and then kind of do like a Midnight Suns thing or something like that moving forward. But I'm just really curious on who they could just bring in that would make sense and stuff. Like I said, obviously Defenders absolutely makes sense, but beyond Defenders, I'm really curious on who they could bring in and what they're thinking about bringing in for season 2 for that team. The other thing is, I'm kind of wondering, I'm very interested in that post-credit scene that obviously is a tee up for the Punisher special presentation.
Yeah, with the dumbest security guard ever. Andy or Anthony, whatever his name was. Like, Anthony. That guy's an idiot. Why would you go shake his hand? You're dumb. You deserved every bit of that. I'm like, you know who he is. You just told him you know who he is. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to go shake your hand. I'm like, you're fucking stupid.
Yeah. But yeah,
it makes me laugh just thinking about it.
I'm really curious now what this special presentation, the special feature is going to be, what's going to look like. I mean, I was worried that it was going to like be either like a, not a prequel, but just like further back in time before these events, if we were going to end on Frank being captured and just being in a holding cell. But obviously we're supposed to assume that because of that post-credit scene, he escapes. So now I'm curious if that's going to kind of bridge the seasons 1 and 2. Like if the Punisher special presentation is going to kind of be almost like a Born Again season like 1.5 type of thing, but more so follow Frank, but chronologically it's taking place in between the events of season 1 and season 2. So it's kind of bridging kind of things that are still happening, but like, now we're seeing it from Frank's perspective, and then we're going to jump back to Matt's perspective in the opening of season 2 type of thing.
Yeah, part of me wonders if it's going to try to bring back some of the old people from the Punisher show too. But there's one character specifically from the Punisher show, that's Micro, who was played by Evan Moss Bacharach. But the issue with that now is that he's now the Thing in the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know if like we'll be able to do that. But it'll be because he was the first actor I thought of for bringing back like a special presentation, or not actor, but character when it comes to Frank's past and stuff. That would have been cool to kind of see brought back. But maybe they could still like figure out a way.
To be fair, the multiverse.
Yeah, that's it. There's that too. But you can also, he does look a little bit more like scruffy, that you can kind of be like, yeah, there's people who look the same essentially. We've had multiple actors play multiple roles within there before too. So yeah, and of course now Ben Grimm is a Rock, so it's like you can just be like, yeah, he's a Rock guy, and then we got this guy here is just like normal guy who was an astronaut in another universe. So it's just like, yeah, I would like to see something like that for sure.
Yeah, I mean that would be really cool. But what about you? Any predictions kind of moving forward from the season 1 finale, like either into the Punisher special presentation, or what we're looking forward to for like the opening of season 2 or the events of season 2 and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's tough because it's tough to avoid leak culture now, I feel like too, because now I'm getting like set photos just kind of put on my page, and now I even if I don't want to see it, I end up seeing it too. So we've already seen some pretty cool stuff that they're going to be diving into that, but I'll try not to like kind of dive too much into that part. But now that the stakes are kind of wrapped up with this finale, I do hope they make like a more conscious effort to kind of make this series feel more like feel part of the wider MCU. I think it was like nice that we kind of get like this official MCU Daredevil show, but they still kind of do. I mean, other than bringing in characters like Jack, who I think is a kind of addition that makes sense into the show. a lot of like the dialogue and references to stuff that happens in the actual MCU, like, or the proper MCU that they're in, is a lot of like passing dialogue lines and stuff like that. I feel like referencing Spider-Man as like Spider Guys and stuff like that. It's kind of doing the thing that they did in the first season of the Netflix show, where like, oh, the guy with the green hammer, or the guy with the hammer and the big green guy,
Yeah.
type of deal, right? So I would, now that Fisk has like a bigger control of overall New York City, which just has some pretty damn important events happening there so far. There was a big alien invasion in the first Avengers movie, and then Thanos' army did come into New York at some point before the blip too. So it just feels like they should, like, when they talk about the Fisk taking control of some of these things, it'd be nice if they kind of work in some of like the real world changes not the real world changes, but the MCU world changes that they made, like, especially technology wise. I feel like they could utilize MCU technology a little bit better in this show too. Like, especially when we got Echo that had Fisk with like this whole technology in his head that helped him interpret sign language, if anything. But like you could have played around with some enhanced tech stuff with him when it comes to that too. So I really hope they kind of like broaden their kind of the expansion of how they integrate MCU stuff into this show now that we've kind of gone back to the basics and we've reintroduced everybody. You've got the band back together and given us this old vibe of the show. Now let's take that and then bring some more elements in there and make it a nice little melting pot of like, especially when it comes to bringing in new or old defenders like Iron Fist too. Like if I'm going to see an Iron Fist come back in the show, I want to see like an upgrade to his powers in some form. So yeah, I think there's going to be some really cool stuff that they can play around with and they're doing it really well with like Daredevil's fighting tactics too. The way he uses his baton and fights a lot better than it was in the Netflix show, even though the combat and that is just next level as well. But there's still like just that more comic booky aspects of fighting that they're really good at doing in the MCU. And I'm just like excited for them to kind of incorporate more of that stuff into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I mean, we can even have it, even before we get to a season 2, whatever other releases we have, if they touch with, New York City and stuff like that, we can start getting mentions of Fisk and other, heroes and other things talking about this is a problem that's going to have to be dealt with or something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it would be great to be able to kind of finally pull this, world that was isolated because it was on Netflix and not part of the MCU to kind of, now that it is part of the MCU, to kind of, just like you said, kind of open the doors and kind of just let things flow both in and out.
Yeah, because it still kind of felt partially isolated to me in the sense that like when Fisk is talking about cracking down on vigilantes, the only two they can seem to focus on are Daredevil and Punisher, because those are the ones that are just tied to those stories so well. And they talk about vigilante crowd being down like 30% or whatever since like the laws or the task force was put out. So it's just like, okay, well, like let's incorporate some like real other vigilantes in there that are like, so I think now that we've kind of gotten the the first season that's kind of gotten the love that it has too, and now they know they can kind of start doing this. I think that season 2 is going to be where we kind of start diving into that a little bit more.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, I would, just like you, I said, I would love to kind of see more people on this team and more interactions, kind of with other people in the MCU that are kind of more established. And not to say anything, against the Defenders, because like I said, I would love to see, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, even Iron Fist, but
Hawkeye.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I would still hold out hope that we get kind of a team up with Hawkeye and Matt, kind of just like being brought together for whatever reason. Because
characters like Bullseye can now interact with so many cool heroes now too. A Hawkeye versus Bullseye kind of a thing would be pretty sick, I feel like. So like, yeah, there's a huge sandbox now that we have here. Let's just not like bring a couple toys into it. Let's bring the whole like army in there. Let's make this army like an army. Like,
yeah.
So I mean, it's like, yeah, building that army to me to like, let's recreate the Defenders with a whole new lineup.
That would be awesome. Yeah, that would be awesome. There is a rumor out there, and this will be the last thing. I don't want to go too far. There is a rumor that potentially Bullseye could be a hidden cameo in the upcoming Thunderbolts.
I've heard the question asked like how would he do in the Thunderbolts too, and I'm just like, he seems like a huge liability.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But it would tie. It would
if you're
tie
going Dark Avengers style stuff. It would, for sure.
Even if it wasn't during the events of the movie, but it was like a post-credit type of thing, and like Valentina goes like, we have some new recruits for.
Yeah, we need to get a little darker with this. And that would be cool.
and then like that is it. And then because like I said, I would like other projects to also kind of start, pulling at the Daredevil universe. So like it doesn't always have to be, the Daredevil universe trying to pull at the MCU. It could be the opposite thing. So yeah. I think a post-credit scene for Thunderbolts.
That's another great way they use the MCU there is bringing in use of cons. So that, again, just give it those bridges so that we can start crossing those bridges.
Right. Exactly. I totally agree. And I, crossing my fingers that we're going to kind of start seeing that more often just as we build towards the second season and beyond that too. So like, yeah. But as we always say, that's what we think. Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of the season 1 finale of Daredevil Born Again? And what are you most looking forward to seeing not only in a season 2, but in the Punisher special presentation? Because that's coming up relatively soon. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, what, a couple, like 6 months, something like that. Yeah, but that's coming up before season 2 is my point. So let us know in the comments below. What are you most looking forward to in season 2 and in the Punisher special presentation moving forward with all of these characters? And, what members are you hoping to potentially see on this new team? Maybe even an updated Defenders lineup with some MCU characters. The bigger, the better. Let us know. There are no wrong answers. And as always, don't forget, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to hear about all of our latest audio and video podcast releases. Bye, everybody!
Popping Off presents That Recap Show.